What's the number one challenge for businesses today?
Workforce development, attracting, recruiting, and retaining people.
And that's why we created this podcast, designed for the frustrated CEO, the under-resourced recruiter, or the overworked manager, to give you the tools to tackle those WTF moments.
It's time to open another workforce therapy file.
And friends, welcome back for this file of the Workforce Therapy Files. Today we are going to kind of go with the Halloween theme. We're recording this here in Louisville right around October 31st, which is going to be the holiday now. I know this will come out a few days later, but we are going with the theme anyway. And we're going to talk about spooky recruiting and some of the issues that you run into, some of the things that you might want to actually avoid. Jamie, let's kick it off and let's just talk a little bit about ghosting.
I actually want to tell you a story. Are you guys ready? I like it. Somebody make a creaking floor noise. Oh, wait. So imagine that you have been in human resources leading recruiting teams for 17 years.
Dun, dun, dun.
You work for large global organizations with a crazy amount of reach and influence. And then, as happened to so many recruiters, you were let go. You were laid off last year.
The leader of recruiting?
Laid off. And now you are in the job search. Now I want you to imagine that you've made it through the first 3 hurdles of your interview process. And now no one is calling you.
Oh, how the turns have tabled.
The turns have tabled. So I had heard this term ghosting. And for those of you who are Gen X or older, I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick little snapshot of what ghosting is. It is when people stop responding to you, friends, relationships, and now individuals are starting to see it much like they always have. This is not a new phenomena. That sounds like a Halloween word, doesn't it?
It
Phenomena. This is not new, right? I mean, people have been ghosted when they've applied for jobs since job recruiting started. Job recruiting? Yeah. That's
Long time.
Long time,
Mm-hmm.
right. So have you guys had any experiences with this? Have you ever been ghosted when you've been looking for a job?
Have I been ghosted?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite an experience. When I got laid off from Citigroup, however long ago that was in my first life, and I had to apply for jobs, I did not realize that that was a thing. Because as a recruiter, growing up as a recruiter, where I got most of my experience, not contacting candidates, even if they weren't a good fit, was just rude. Just so bizarre that that happens.
Yeah.
Especially if you get an interview or a phone screen, and then you don't even get a decline letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, no bones there.
And in my first job when I was recruiting, we managed all of our candidate flow through spreadsheets.
Oh, Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd have like a little checkbox to say whether or not you had contacted the people that applied to make sure that you were staying on top of all of that contact because you sent individual emails because there weren't the abilities that you have in systems now. So right now in a system, you could actually set it up to where once you decline, the system automatically notifies somebody that they're no longer in consideration. But there are some individuals and still not even receiving that. And I think that's spooky.
Are we, just for definition's sake, are we considering ghosting if you have applied for a job and you didn't hear back? Are you being ghosted?
I think
Or
yes.
is it just when there's a reciprocal communication?
I agree with Jamie. I think if you apply for a job, get an interview or not, you should still have correspondence that you get that says that you're not qualified or we've gone in a different direction, whatever. But if you have interviewed, you have to have some sort of correspondence, in my opinion, because it's not about you at that point. It's about the brand of the individual.
Absolutely. And the brand of the company.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I've told you guys this before, but some of my absolute best hires were individuals that I had interviewed previously and then decided not to hire. But I called them and had a conversation and talked to them about why I didn't think this was the right role for them right now, the things I'd like to see them think about or consider for consideration the next time. And it was so interesting to see the individuals that would take that feedback, run with it, apply again. And now all of a sudden, we are absolutely going to work together again because everything about who I like to work with, you know, can take feedback, can provide some sort of evidence that you've considered that feedback. That goes a long way for me.
Well, and I think, too, it depends on the candidate, right? if you can have a conversation with a candidate after you've had that phone screen or interview, whatever, and you can get them to listen to your thoughts and opinions on their experience, the way they present their resume, the way they present themselves in the interview, could be so small in comparison to the candidate that did get the job. I think that helps with communication and avoid ghosting also.
Yeah. But to your point, Jason, I think it gets worse the further you've gone. So let's imagine the candidate you are now one of the final two. If you're one of the final two and you've gone through the activity of going through an application, a phone interview, you've now come in for a face-to-face, you've taken considerable personal time and investment to apply for that position. And for someone to not offer you the consideration of follow-up, I think that's a slap in the face and a very poor representation of the company.
And you're going to remember that from a candidate perspective.
And probably tell the other 5 people that you know that were thinking about applying there, well, don't expect to hear anything.
So I'm the recruiter. I have 500 applications for one job.
Yep.
I have to respond to all those people.
Yes. And mostly the system will do it for you. If you have a good recruiting system, it's going to do a lot of that initial notification. Because I'm not saying every single one of those individuals need a face-to-face or a telephonic contact, but the system itself will tell somebody that you're no longer in consideration for that role.
Well, and to that point, having a good applicant tracking software system is important.
Yeah.
But that can also put us into a zombie phase. Are you guys familiar with this?
Another creepy term.
Zombies.
I'm not going to tell you the joke I told earlier about zombies. Okay, go ahead.
So zombies are those that only look at resumes that have these checked boxes.
Yes.
As opposed to, okay, here's an example. Let me step back. If you require a bachelor's degree in whatever versus bachelor's degree or equivalent experience, the system will knock out all of those resumes that don't have a minimum expectation of a bachelor's degree, which I don't appreciate because I, for one, don't have a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I have started a business and I've run a business for 8 years successfully. And before that, had a business and sold it. So I'm willing to bet the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I would bring to the table to any position would be a completely different source of that skill set
Yeah,
than someone that does have a college degree.
absolutely.
But a system or a zombie recruiter could eliminate my resume just because of that fact.
Absolutely. One of my favorite people I ever worked with was somebody that worked in employee relations, and she didn't have her college degree, but she had a degree in paralegal studies, and she became this expert in domestic violence and crisis management. She was a master investigator and trained all kinds of people because she was incredibly skilled. And if she had applied at a lot of companies, I think they would have declined her because she didn't have her bachelor's degree. And
It's
I
just
think
crazy to
that's
me.
absolutely, because she was incredibly good at her job.
Mm-hmm.
Zombie recruiters. That's going to stay with me forever outside of this theme.
Jason?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and then you have, staying with the theme, we have the invisible man or invisible woman.
Yes.
Let's define that. What's that?
So that is someone not doing internal talent reviews, not looking at your bench.
Yeah.
We go through this lengthy process of recruiting. We do all this work to bring an unknown in when you may have someone right behind you that can handle this job.
Yeah.
Not only can handle it, they want it. And a lot of companies have a great policy of trying to promote from within when possible. But smaller businesses often don't. They just don't. There's no policy there. It's just it's reactive. So, I think it's important to remember who you have on your team.
Yeah.
So I have a question, though. When you're talking about invisible man / woman, whatever they are, whose responsibility is it to step up to say, I have this experience or I have this education? Who owns it at that point? Is it the individual themselves or is it their manager or supporting team?
Well, the invisible man, invisible woman, the employee has to know the position exists, first of all, or that it's going to be recruited. So there should probably be some sort of process internally, right, of farming your own field. So I don't know. You guys are probably more qualified to answer that one than I am, but I think there should be a process.
I
around
think that
it.
was a great answer. I would say yes. I think it's both of their responsibilities. I think it's the responsibility of the candidate to make sure that individuals know who they are, what they're interested in, what capabilities they have, and the things they're interested in growing. But I also think it's the responsibility of leaders to understand what the plans are for the people on your team so that you can find those opportunities where they can learn, grow, and stretch through those opportunities.
So we're proposing then an internal recruiting process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just managers are, they're gardeners. They're gardening their team. They're growing their team. And often recruiters don't know what talent is on that team. They may have recruited them 6 years ago. They don't know how they've developed. Maybe they're not doing the reviews. Maybe they're not as involved, especially in a very large organization. So it's really, that has to be communicated back to the management, that, hey, remember to look at who you have now. Can anyone you have on the team do this position? Because it might be easier to recruit for that lower level position than it would be for this second tier or management position that's open.
And recruiters, one of the things I would advise that you do is also include that in your intake. So when you're having an initial conversation with the hiring manager, ask them who they have on their team that could be a good fit, even if it's not 100% match, because you can fill 20 to 30% through other onboarding experiences for an internal candidate.
Agreed. So what about Frankenstein?
Frankenstein.
Do you guys have any ideas on what this topic's about?
Yes.
Yeah, so Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein's monster, to be correct, is an amalgamation of different things. And, a lot of times we try to figure out, recruiters try to figure out who's going to be a good culture fit. But I think Frankenstein is about forcing a fit, creating a monster from it within your own team that maybe isn't the right fit, so the opposite of the invisible man, invisible woman.
Mm-hmm.
This is somebody who you're trying to push into something that isn't really best for them,
Or you're turning somebody down because you aren't entirely sure they're going to be the best fit for your team versus trying to figure out how candidates can help your team grow and change and shift
And stretch.
and stretch.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree. It's like a square peg in a round hole, but sometimes the intricacies of a position, you have to take the override of knowledge, skills, and abilities and figure out a way to make the team work
Yeah.
with the information that you have about character and persona and all those things. So sometimes you have to have a Frankenstein,
Frankenstein?
like,
You can call it whatever you want, Molly. You can say Frankenstein.
thanks,
That's fine.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and you'll reap the benefits of not doing that, and the employee too. I mean, my goodness, they're going to be forced into something that isn't really for them, and they're going to feel obligated to be part of the team and to do what they need to do to make it happen. So you're really putting them in a bad position as well. Not you, but this just the culture of trying to push culture fits is going to end up backfiring. So
And not all things that people are trying to match up with are great things in large numbers. So if you were to say, hey, our culture is we're all just go-getters and we're all super assertive, but you get like 100 of super assertive folks all in the same room who are ready to just take the world, but that could look like a really bad storm. Like you have to be very thoughtful about what pieces of your culture you have to emulate, and then what are the pieces that you need to start adding to.
well, and remember the story of
Balancing it.
Frankenstein. I mean, Frankenstein was really a monster because Frankenstein didn't understand what he was doing.
Yeah.
And so you're putting someone in a position where they're going to be doing things that they don't know how to do. They're going to feel forced. And then what happens at the end? The pitchforks come out, the torches, and that's the team. The team's going to say, whoa, no way. This is crazy. Why did you put this person in charge? Just because they're here, you're trying to force them into this.
So, real quick, with the Frankenstein reference and culture fit versus culture contribution, have you guys watched Super Pumped?
No,
It's on Netflix.
I saw the ad, but I
It's
haven't
like
watched
8 episodes, must watch.
it. Okay.
It's about Uber and the startup of Uber and the first couple of years of Uber. And as we're sitting here talking, that's what keeps popping into my head about Frankenstein, is because the culture was so toxic when they first started. One of the very first questions that the CEO asked every candidate was, do you consider yourself, you're going to have to beat me,
An a-hole.
an a-hole? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to go for the whole word.
I'm helping.
But that was one of his interviewing questions. And just to think about that being your first impression
Yeah.
from a cultural standpoint, and you want the job because you want to work for a tech company that is changing the way that everyone does everything. I mean, Uber, one of the
Yeah.
things we were taught growing up, don't get in a car with strangers. Well, you're having one come to the house and pick you up in some cases. So being forced into an organization that you think would be a good fit, sometimes you got to ride that wave, but unfortunately, people don't know how to manage through it the right way so that it has a better result than failure.
Mm-hmm. That's a good summary.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about ghosts. We've talked about zombies, the invisible man, invisible woman.
Mhm.
We've talked about Frankenstein. And the last one we were going to talk about is very actually similar to Frankenstein.
Ooh.
And that's the vampire, Dracula, Vlad Dracul.
That was the worst vampire impression.
Whoa. We have to talk like this.
You sound like Count Chocula.
I do. I am much more Count Chocula than I am Dracula. That sounds good, actually, right now, Bola.
So I have a reference for this vampire.
Yeah.
Someone that you work with and you dread going to work because you sit with this person more so than the job. People that will quit a job because of the vampire that's sitting next to them versus finding reward in the position that they have.
Well, and you know, going back to Frankenstein, the culture, the forced culture fit, this vampire is probably used to be a Frankenstein. They were a product of some sort of forced culture fit.
Good point.
They were put somewhere they didn't need to be anyway. It's not fair to them. And now they're just dragging everyone down. They were probably promoted because they were the one. I think of Michael Scott on The Office. We all love him. But, you know, he was the best salesman. And that's why
Not
he was
in the
promoted.
Right role. Yeah.
He was promoted because he was a great salesman, but not because he was a great manager. And we saw how that worked out. I mean, through the whole series, however many episodes and however many seasons, he was trying to be a good manager and just was not. He was just a jerk.
Yeah.
And so a funny one, but a jerk. And there are a lot of organizations that have these vampires lurking in every department just because they've been there so long. And now they're just holding everything back.
Yeah.
So
Another kind of vampire that I feel like happens that recruiters come across are those individuals who are really productive, but they are leaving bodies behind them everywhere they go. They are trampling on their administrative support, their the support that might be processing their sale, the individuals who are responsible for doing the work that are behind them. I think sales types sometimes have a tendency, based on really aggressive goals, to kind of start to align like that. And I think keeping productive jerks and promoting individuals and actually giving them a lot of positive kudos for achieving results, regardless of how they do it, can create those vampires.
yeah, absolutely. And so we're here talking about the problem, but why don't we talk about the solution
Yes.
for that one? We did give some.
Well, we
some
can
tips on
recap
the
them
others.
too.
Yeah. So with the ghosts, okay. So how do you solve that problem?
Yeah, you just got to make sure that you're appropriately staffed so that you give out great communication. All candidates deserve to know where they are in the process. So if your systems don't do that automatically, you need to build that into your process. Molly,
And those
would you-
things are automated. You can, even in your email, if it's
Even
not
in
through the
Indeed.
system, yeah, you can make that happen and just set reminders for yourself. Because again, in this situation as a recruiter, unless you're planning to stay with your current employer for 30, 40 years, you're going to have a different adventure and you're probably still going to be some sort of a recruiter. So your personal brand is just as important, if not more so, than the brand that you work for.
Absolutely.
What about zombies, Jamie? How do you solve that one?
You know, we actually touched on this in one of our prior episodes where we talked about really learning the job that you're recruiting for, because I think that that is a big thing, is to understand what really matters and what really drives results. And then in your screening, ask questions about the pieces that the individual seemingly is missing to see whether or not they filled it in some other kind of way.
Well, and just making sure that you're keeping your options open. Like, I know you said 5 years, but what if they have 4 and the previous job was something related to it, looking for. And here's another thing too. I think we are able to look closer at the candidates that we receive when the job market is tighter than when we just have an influx of candidates overall.
And to Molly's point earlier, also make sure that your knockout questions are the right knockout questions.
That's right.
So that your system is not automatically taking candidates out that you haven't had an opportunity to review.
The bias that we can create will also create zombies, and you don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the college degree, looking at someone's name, if
where
the
they
people
live,
put dates on their education, those types of things, you have bias, and you don't even know that it's happening, which is another state of zombiness.
zombiness.
And I think with the invisible man, invisible woman, the next one, we've talked about the 3 Ps that we identified earlier on in some earlier episodes. Process really kind of helps solve that one. And same thing with zombies, but if you have a process around the way you're doing anything like that, you're going to be able to look at your bench. The invisible man, invisible woman, remember, is the person in your organization that's probably well qualified, maybe not speaking up, maybe doesn't know the job is open. But if there's a process to do an internal search before an external search starts, it will save so much time. And even if you're a small organization, starting that in the early years is good. My company's very small. We have 20 people on my team, maybe at any given time. And it's a very, hiring can be very clumsy for us because we don't have an HR person on staff. We don't have a recruiter.
Gosh, I wish you knew some folks.
If only I had some resources. But we've kind of developed an informal process around that we are formalizing now. And so even small organizations, it's just a matter of writing it down and saying, this is our process. Anytime we go to hire, look at it, see who we've got internally, and then move on.
So include that in your regular strategic people planning. And even if you're only doing this annually, after your performance reviews, looking at past performance for this past year against goals, what your organization needs to do in the coming year, and then try to figure out who do you have on staff that can help fill some of those holes, starts really good conversations.
Mm-hmm. And so Frankenstein, stitching together that role, stitching together that person for the role that maybe isn't the right fit for them. How do we avoid that? Because it's easy. It's easy just to shove them in that place and be like, okay, I don't have to hire now. This is fixed.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it goes back to an episode that we spoke on this a little bit previously. If you haven't looked at the job description that you're hiring for in a vacancy since the job started with the company, you're not filling it the right way anyway, because that job has changed.
Yep. And I think if you are weeding somebody out because you don't think they're going to be a culture fit, you need to ask yourself some more questions. You just need to dive into it and get more specific about what it is and make sure you've asked those questions to make sure that that's a good reason to exclude that candidate. Because I think that there are some people that would be passed over very easily, inappropriately.
Yeah. And then what do we do about the vampire?
Identify them and get them out.
Yeah.
They are throwing anchors off the back of that boat and dragging you down.
Wrong
Let it
podcast,
go,
Molly. Wrong
let it go.
podcast.
This is about hiring, not firing.
This is not Lake Life with Molly and Chad. Plug.
No, but you want individuals that are sucking the life out of everybody and flying away. Thank you for that one, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
You want them gone.
Yeah.
Get them out. Either get them up or get them out. One or the other.
And make sure that your reward systems and the performance process that you have are not rewarding people for being vampires. Because believe it or not, they are set up that way. If a bulk of my compensation comes from me making sure that these sales goals are hit, and I need that to support my family, and that's the only thing I'm focused on, then sometimes I may not think about all the things that happen from A to Z to achieve that goal. So we have to be thoughtful about that.
Well, I think there are probably several more monsters we could identify, but we're running out of time. So, the ghosts, the zombies, the invisible people, the Frankensteins, the vampires. There were just a few tips that we wanted to lay out there for you to see if they would help. But obviously, as usual, reach out if you have questions or if you have a specific issue inside your recruiting process or your organization that you want to address. We're happy to help you with your ghosts and monsters.
So reach out to us on LinkedIn, see our contact information in the show notes. And Jim, close that file. Thanks for listening to the Workforce Therapy Files. We hope you learned something new, and we're thankful for the time that you spent with us today. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss, reach out to us. Our contact information is listed in the show notes. Until next time, keep your head up.